What is the creepiest glitch in the Matrix you have experienced? 1. When I was in high school, my little sister, mom and I would eat dinner together every evening and tell each other about our days. At the time my sister was young, only in elementary school. On a Monday during summer break we were all having dinner and my sister told us about how she and our next door neighbors were playing with their new cat when it got loose outside. They had to spend the whole day looking for it. Fast forward 2 days at dinner time, and my sister tells the exact same story she had 2 days prior. My mom and I looked at each other funny because we both clearly remembered the cat story. When we asked my sister if she had mistaken the day since she told us the story on Monday, she just gave us this blank look and had no memory of it. The creepy part is when we called our neighbors to ask them about the cat incident, they told us all of it happened that day, Wednesday, and they weren't even in town on Monday. So my sister told us a story 2 days before it happened and had no memory of it. How is that possible? Where was my sister on Monday? 2. My mother did all her GYN appointments with a doctor in downtown Austin. He was in the 5th floor of this hospital building and had a long-time nurse receptionist named Allison. I remember attending her appointments when I was little, and my mother would make a game out of finding the office and being in the waiting room, which was colorfully decorated with a forest scene. Allison was a super sweet woman who was half babysitter for us kids too. She would read us books and give us coloring books and occasionally even listen to our dreadful knock-knock jokes. We all referred to her as Alice in Wonderland. Anyway, years down the road, I got married and pregnant and started searching for an OB since I had moved back to Austin relatively recently before that. My mother suggested I go see if that doctor, who was super young, low 30s, when I was born, was still in business. Well, I could not find his name in the hospital directory, so I figured I would just swing by the office and check. My mother happened to be in town. She had moved years ago, and came with me. We both joked about it being so familiar but reverse situations now. As we reached the stairs, we ran into a problem. There was no 5th floor of this hospital office building. Odd. We both must have misremembered it. We knew it was on the top floor, so it must have been the 4th. Nope, not there. We thought maybe we were in the wrong building. Except we parked in the same parking garage thing from 20 years ago and walked the same route. That doctor does not exist. Never did apparently. My mother and my brother and I are the only ones who remember him in Alice in Wonderland. We have asked around, including among the hospital staff. We even looked up our birth certificates, which are new copies, and just list attending physician. One of my childhood memories is fake but shared with my brother and my mother. 3. Before making an offer on our house, my husband and I went for a viewing with our 3-year-old daughter whom we'd left with a babysitter the first time we saw the house. As we walked in, I told her she could choose a bedroom. She said, "I want the dinosaur room," and ran upstairs. Okay, 3-year-olds say random stuff. A moment later, she called out, "Here it is." And sure enough, the closet of her bedroom was covered with dinosaur stickers. My husband, the realtor, and I were all freaked out. The kid acted like she knew the stickers were there, but none of us remembered seeing them before, and we certainly hadn't talked about them. The house was vacant and immaculately clean. It was an estate sale. We left the stickers up. More coincidence than glitch, but another fun layer. My daughter shares a name with a Pokemon, which we didn't know at the time. Years later, when she got into Pokemon, she recognized her namesake was also part of the sticker collection. 4. I have 2 stories that I've never quite been able to explain. The first one definitely counts as a glitch, but I'm not too sure about the second. I'll tell it anyway though. So the first story happened well over a decade ago, and I've posted about it before in another thread, but I was so freaked out by it that I remember it vividly to this day. When I was around 9 or 10 years old, I had this bunk bed with a ladder that would hook onto the metal base that held up the top bunk. To be honest, it was kind of a hazard, but I survived, so I'll call that a win. Anyway, this one day I was at my childhood friend's house, chilling in her room with her as we watched one of those infamous early 2000s kids shows. I think it might have been the Amanda Show. At some point I began to drift off to sleep. When I was in that weird twilight state between being asleep and awake, I started to see what I can only describe as kind of a movie in my head. I could tell I was at least partially awake, because I was aware of my surroundings. I could hear the chirping of my friend's guinea pigs in the background and the soundtrack of her TV show. The images I was seeing had this super surreal quality to them. They were transparent, like I could see through them to the darkness behind my eyelids. I saw myself in them, at my house, in my bedroom. My friend was standing on the right side of me, my brother was standing on my left, and I was standing in front of the ladder to my bunk bed. Behind me, there was a small table which stood against the wall of my bedroom. I saw myself start to climb up on my ladder, and somehow I knew I was trying to get something off of my bed. I slept on the top bunk. As I climbed the ladder, I began to fall backwards, and I knew I was going to hit my head on the table. With a jolt I snapped back to full alertness, sitting bolt upright in my friend's bed, breathing hard as my heart pounded in my chest. I told my friend about what I'd seen, and after a few moments I managed to calm down and put it out of my head. A couple of hours later, we decided that I was going to spend the night at my friend's house. I called my mom to ask for permission before my friend and I walked down the street to my house. I gathered up my clothes, pajamas, etc., and then went to grab something from my bed. As I was preparing to climb the ladder up to my bed, I froze. I realized that my friend was standing on my right and my brother was on my left. Behind me was the little table. I hesitantly pulled the ladder toward me, only to realize that there was no resistance whatsoever. It was completely unhooked from my bed, leaning up against it. If I had begun to climb it before checking to see if it was properly hooked to my bed, my weight would have pulled it backward, and I would almost definitely have hit the back of my head on the little table behind me. I went and told my mom about the incident, still in shock. I didn't know how my ladder had come unhooked from my bed, since it was securely fastened that morning when I'd left for school. My mom looked at me with an expression between shock and horror as she revealed to me that she'd taken down my ladder earlier that day while I was at school because she was afraid my little brother would try to climb up onto my bed and fall. When I'd called her to let her know I was coming home to get some stuff to spend the night at my friend's house, she'd put the ladder back, not realizing that it wasn't hooked onto my bed. I had no idea before that day that my mom had a habit of removing the ladder from my bed when I wasn't home. My second story happened a few years ago. I was somewhere around 20 or 21 years old. I'm 24 now, and I was visiting my mom for the Christmas break. It was December 23rd. I was exhausted after the 2+ hour bus trip, on top of the previous few hours I'd spent filling my mother in on what I'd been up to the past few months at university. My mother and stepfather were asleep on the living room couches, and I was sitting on the love seat flipping aimlessly through unappealing late-night TV shows. Sometime between midnight and 1 a.m. I decided that I wanted to go to bed, but I kept flipping through the channels. I wanted nothing more than to just go and crash after my long and hectic day, but for whatever reason I felt like I couldn't just yet. There was something I still had to do before I could go to bed, but I couldn't for the life of me figure out what it was. After a while I started to get angry. It was like I was fighting with myself, one half of me wanting to go to bed, while the other half insisted that I had to wait. Wait for what though? All of a sudden, I heard this loud snapping sound from beside the TV. I stood up to check it out and realized to my horror that the cable to the little space heater in the living room had caught fire. It was an old space heater with a cord my stepfather had spliced together to fix it after it had broken, and the exposed pieces of the wire had been wrapped in electrical tape. I yelled fire at my sleeping parents and my stepfather jolted awake and lunged to his feet to grab the heater, by which time I had already yanked the cord out of the wall and ran outside with the heater. Once I was sure that the fire had died out and the heater was safe, I went back inside, leaving the heater out on the concrete front stoop, flooded with adrenaline. After a few moments spent calming myself down, the adrenaline rush subsided and I thought once again that I was exhausted and wanted to go to bed. I realized that that feeling like I was waiting for something was gone, and I fell into bed and went to sleep. 5. When I was a kid I used to explore the forest near my home. I'd spend hours and hours just wandering around during the summer. I've got this distinct memory of crossing a really rough muddy valley with a bunch of downed trees and coming over the top of the ridge on the other side, out of the woods, to look down on what I remembered as a field of stone ruins. It was getting late and I had to go get home and I always planned to go back and explore them. I think I ended up having to go back to school soon after and didn't get to look for them again until much later. But I thought about them a lot. Well, I never found them again. I got older and developed a better grasp on my surroundings, the layout of the town, the size and shape of the woods, as well as the realization that they aren't nearly as big or endless as my younger self had imagined them to be. And that's when I realized that the ruins I thought I saw could not possibly have been where I thought I saw them. I'm forced to assume I just imagined it. Or, I have one other theory about a similar shaped hill that overlooks a bunch of houses which maybe my child brain confused for ruins in the light of sunset. I really don't know. Sure was disappointing to realize though, that I'll never get to explore those amazing ruins I thought I saw. 6. This happened to my family, if not me personally. Thanks to time zones, it's also a confusing story to tell. My brother was taking a trip out west. From my dad's perspective, he dropped my brother off at the airport before work. My brother was supposed to have over an hour before his flight, followed by a 4-hour flight. After work, about 8 hours later, my dad received a phone call from my brother. So from dad's perspective, my brother should have been at his destination for less than 3 hours. But, to my brother, he took his flight, got to his destination, was picked up by his friends, went to dinner, spent the night, spent the following day sightseeing, and called my dad that evening. He thought he had been there over 24 hours. The confusion ended in a weird argument, but both stick to their version of events and both have things like printouts of flights to prove that they were right. I have no idea how either dad lost a day or my brother gained one. 7. I'm not sure if this really counts as a glitch but still creepy and unexplained. A bit of context, I dated my ex, important detail, she had long hair at this point, then we drifted away for a while, then we went back together in a relationship, she cut it short at that point. During the relationship I had a dream where she was there, however her dream version was in the past as she still had her long hair. In the dream she avoided me and acted really strange as if we weren't together, just like it would have been during the drifted apart period. I was weirded out but not much since it was a dream, right? Well, I told her about the dream and turns out that she had dreamt the exact same dream as me, except little detail, hers was 2 years before. Exactly during the time when she had long hair and we weren't in each other's lives. She remembers being weirded out because in the dream I acted like if we were together and our both descriptions of both the place and the people present in the dream matched perfectly. It was a house party with lots of people and some common friends. Also it had lots of strange rooms with bizarre stuff like certain animals, objects or simply the layout of the rooms that made it impossible to just be a coincidence. TLDR, multiplayer dream with my ex with a 2-year gap between both perspectives. 8. So I commented about this over on the ME sub, where it really doesn't belong, since the only witnesses that I know of were my husband and I. But it's a strange thing I can't explain. I am really into trees, and we live in a neighborhood with a lot of nice, mature oaks, elms, maples, etc. There's a house around the corner that had 2 absolutely huge magnolias, which are uncommon in my area. I used to love to pass them on my walks because they smelled great. Hubby and I always get pissed when neighbors cut down healthy trees for no reason. So we particularly noticed when we were on a walk and both magnolias had been chopped down. I could see both stumps surrounded by the chopped up wood and a wealth of smaller branches. I went on a rant about it, and even grabbed a small branch with a bud from the ground near the stump to take home. Without the 2 trees, this house had no privacy from the next house over anymore, so you could easily see the entire yard next door from where we stood, something not possible when that tree was there, as it was pretty huge. Fast forward to the spring, and I'm out walking around again, and there's the magnolia tree that was closer to the road, safe and sound. Now I know people will say I only saw one cut down, but I distinctly remember hubby's in my conversation and saying why did they have to cut them both down? I could see having to remove the one close to the house, but the one nearer the road there was no reason to remove. Hubby does remember our conversation, but is quicker to assume we somehow were mistaken than I am. Because I remember the 2 stumps and being so angry they were both gone. Happily, one of them is back. 9. A couple of days ago my friend and I happened to be driving through the same town. I was getting gas over the state line because it's 30 cents cheaper and he was coming back from the mall. We get to work later that night and he starts telling people how I was speeding down the road and he couldn't keep up with me. I told him I saw him pass by me when I was pulling out of the gas station, so I don't know how I could have gotten ahead of him. He said he saw me pulling out of Dollar General ahead of him. Either my friend saw the same model and color of Versa from out of state with a driver that looks like me screwing around with an iPod drive up the same road I live on, which would be weird because we live in the middle of goddamn nowhere, or glitch in the matrix. Either way is kind of funny.
Thanks for watching. If you got this far, leave a comment, like if you liked it, and follow for more.